The live export ban to Indonesia has been lifted, but we still don't know when cattle will leave our shores. Primary industry ministers from across the country met the Federal Minister Joe Ludwig in Perth this week to find ways to speed up the resumption of the trade. Our Agriculture Minister, Terry Redman, thinks that first shipment may only be weeks away, and he's preparing another trip to Indonesia to help rebuild damaged relations. I spoke to him earlier. Terry Redman, welcome to 7:30.
Thanks, Eliza. Good to be here.
Now, 1 week on from the lifting of the ban, what's changed?
Oh, look, I think one needs to recognise that just because the ban's lifted doesn't mean that things get fixed up. Certainly it's very pleasing that the federal government has lifted the ban, and certainly the state's been advocating very strongly for that. But I think we also recognise that the hit or the impact on industry here is going to be sustained for some time.
And when will that happen?
I'm quietly confident that it's going to happen soon. It's pretty hard to put a date on it. That will be up to industry to do that. I'm confident that they can again, but the impact here is going to be sustained. We don't know the pace of that recovery either.
So soon, is that days or is that weeks?
Oh, look, I'd like to think it's within weeks. It's been a week now since the ban's been lifted. Just because that's happened doesn't mean that things get back to where they were. It's got a long way to go.
Now, you've been spending a lot of time over the last month with Joe Ludwig. What's your opinion of his management of this situation now, 1 month on?
Whilst I probably disagree with how they managed this issue right from the outset, particularly in respect to the response and how quick that response was and how abrupt the response was in terms of the decision around the total ban, I am, and it is important that I remain engaged with the federal government. I've been doing that. I have regular conversations with Joe Ludwig. Now it's about getting the trade up and going. I absolutely support the position he's taking in ensuring that we have supply chains that have stock going into abattoirs that do the right thing. Every Western Australian wants to achieve that, and it is important that I do work closely with his office to achieve that end. And so certainly the relationship's cordial and sound. So whilst I didn't agree with some of the early decisions, it is important that I do work closely with him.
It seemed also that he was sort of pushed back for Kevin Rudd, and that was just before the ban was lifted. I mean, has he told you at all about some of the pressures that he's been under during this last month?
Look, there's certainly some politics that sits around the federal government now, and certainly around Joe Ludwig on this issue. That's something he has to manage and deal with. I've certainly have the objective to maintain a sustainable live trade out of Western Australia. I think we've been advocating right from the start our desire to achieve that. We've been deploying our resources to get that outcome. We've made contact with Indonesia. I did make calls early on for a very senior Australian minister to visit Indonesia, and certainly Kevin Rudd was one of those, and I think that will certainly help to build the damaged relationship that we have with Indonesia.
I've heard from some pastoralists who've called, the Country Hour, different radio stations. They've been sort of a bit bemused by him as a person, his management style. Can you offer any, sort of shed any light on what he's like? Has he been incredibly concerned about the impact of this ban on pastoralists?
I think what's clear now, and particularly out of the Ministerial Council meeting we had a couple of days ago, has shown that there's strong support for the live trade. I'm pleased that that's the outcome that's been laid, and that comes from all the other state ministers as well. I'm sure Joe Ludwig is on the same page as everyone else in achieving that end.
And he's, I think, said yesterday that you were both working in lockstep with the industry. I mean, is that politically advantageous for you? Because obviously you went out on a limb early, the state government did, and copped a bit of flack from the feds. Obviously, behind the scenes, they didn't want you to go to Indonesia. So, is this where you want to be at this stage of the process?
I think we took the right decision early. The state government and myself led a different position that was put up at that time. It was important to me to articulate where industry was at. It's important that I maintain a close relationship with Joe Ludwig. This isn't about Terry Redman scoring points now. This is about getting an industry back to where it was.
Just finally, you say hopefully weeks. Is that just for the big guys? I mean, what happens to all the other people?
There's a strong message that came out of the meeting we had in Broome with the Federal Minister and myself just recently, that the pastoralists, the small ones in Western Australia, has got a lot of smaller producers, are likely to miss out or have concern that they'll miss out on the limited trade that might start up into Indonesia. I share that concern. I'm even considering another trip into Indonesia to help in our relationship there, such that we can help on the Indonesian side to ensure we can get the sort of volumes back to where they were.
When would you go to Indonesia?
I'm considering that now. In fact, I met with a senior Indonesian official out of the Trade Office in Indonesia today, and he has indicated his desire to host a visit from myself back there soon.
So he went to you. Would Joe Ludwig be a part of this?
The indication I gave to the Director of Trade from Indonesia was that I was interested in going back to Indonesia, and I was asking him really to take the message back. To say that, look, I'm interested in going back. It's about building relationships between this state and the nation over there, and to see what I can do to help on the Indonesian end with getting a strong resumption of trade, and I think also to help build the relationship back such that Indonesia can have confidence in Western Australia and indeed Australia as a supplier.
Okay, Minister, thanks for your time.
Thanks very much.